When a former royal squares off with Britain's sharpest tongue, sparks don't just fly, they explode across live television. And tonight, you're about to witness the moment Meghan Markle pushed Graham Norton past his breaking point. Until he did the unthinkable, he kicked her off his show. What started as playful banter quickly spiraled into a savage clash of egos, pride, and power. It proved that even Britain's most charming host has limits, and when respect is tossed out the window, anything can happen. The stage was set literally. The iconic Graham Norton Show glowed under its purple and red studio lights. Cameras rolling, audience buzzing with anticipation. Graham spun dramatically in his chair, flashing that mischievous grin that always says, "You're in for a ride tonight." And the guest? None other than Meghan Markle, the woman who has captivated, divided, and drained public opinion in equal measure. Graham tugged on his cufflinks with theatrical flair and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Meghan Markle." The crowd erupted not with thunder, but with that polite, hesitant applause you give when you're not quite sure what's about to happen. Then she appeared, Meghan, stepping out in a form-fitting emerald dress, every inch of her styled to perfection. Her heels clacked sharply against the floor, echoing through the studio like warning shots before a duel. She smiled. But it was the kind of smile rehearsed in a mirror, not one born of warmth. Graham leaned in with his signature charm. "Meghan, wonderful to have you here." Air kisses, perfectly timed for the cameras. "Thank you, Graham. Lovely to be here," she said coolly, her eyes flicking to the lens, making sure every angle was picture perfect, before locking onto him like a chess player eyeing her opponent. And just like that, the tension was undeniable. Not nervous tension. No, this was the kind of silent duel where every glance, every smirk, every pause screamed, "Game on." Meghan settled on the infamous red sofa, legs crossed with surgical precision, hands resting in her lap like a queen addressing her court. But Graham? He was ready to pounce. "So," he began, voice dripping with cheek, "the whole world seems to have something to say about you lately. You're practically keeping half the British tabloids in business. Is that the plan? Stimulate the economy single-handedly?" The audience laughed, of course they did. That was classic Graham. But Meghan? Her smile barely touched her eyes. "Well, Graham," she replied, her voice as smooth as glass, "I wouldn't expect you to understand the complexities of living your life under constant attack. But I wouldn't call it stimulating the economy. More like feeding vultures," gasps, a ripple through the room. Did she just call the press vultures on his stage? "Oh, good heavens," Graham quipped, keeping his tone light, but that twitch in his eyebrow betrayed him. "Feeding vultures? Surely you've had your share of choice words, too. Interviews, a book, a Netflix series, you've given them plenty to chew on, haven't you?" Meghan tilted her head, smirk curling at her lips. And in that smirk, you could almost feel the storm about to break. "I'm sorry, Graham," Meghan snapped, her tone slicing through the studio like glass. "Is this your show or their show? Are you here to interview me or just regurgitate tabloid nonsense?" The audience laughed, but this time, it was nervous, awkward. The kind of laughter that says, "Oh no, this just got real." Graham's grin tightened, but the showman in him never broke. He leaned back slowly, clasping his hands over his knee, that trademark smirk plastered in place. "Oh, I assure you, Meghan, these are my questions. Though, I admit, they're probably what everyone at home is dying to hear." "Well," she fired back crisply, "perhaps you should think about asking better questions." And just like that, the temperature in the room dropped. The playful back and forth was gone. The subtle jabs replaced with open hostility. Suddenly, this wasn't cheeky banter, it was a duel, and millions were watching every strike. The air in the studio felt electric, tightening with each word. Meghan's sharp tongue clashed head-on with Graham's legendary wit, and it was only a matter of time before one of them broke. Graham took a slow sip from his water glass, eyes narrowing just slightly as he set it down. Then, smooth as silk, he went in for the kill. "So, Meghan, you've always championed honesty and openness. Let's be honest then. Do you ever regret leaving the royal family? Or is everything just exactly as you planned it?" The audience gasped, soft but unmistakable. That was bold. Meghan's lips tightened before she responded. "Regret? No. I regret trusting people who didn't deserve it. But leaving? Absolutely not. Graham leaned forward now, elbows resting on his knees, eyes locked on hers. You say that quite convincingly. Though, some might say you've made a career out of walking away from obligations. Boom. The shot landed. The crowd sucked in a breath. Meghan's head jerked toward him, her practiced smile gone. Excuse me? Is this how you treat all your guests, Graham? Or is this just for me? Oh no, he replied coolly, letting that sly grin crawl back onto his face. Just the special ones. Meghan gave a sharp laugh, but there was no warmth in it. Well, I suppose you have to provoke someone to make good television. Is that what this is, Graham? Because it feels less like an interview and more like bad therapy. The audience tittered nervously, but the laughter died quickly as Meghan's words turned even sharper. Graham, for someone who thrives off other people's stories, you're surprisingly bad at listening to them. And that's when it 20 odds happened. Graham's eyes flashed with something darker, something sharper. The smile faded for just a moment. Oh, I listen just fine, Meghan. He shot back. I just happen to know when a story is a performance rather than reality. That clearly struck a nerve. Performance? Are you implying my life is some kind of act? Well, Graham replied lightly, tilting his head with a smirk. You are an actress. Boom. The audience erupted half gasps, half nervous laughter. Even the band in the corner exchanged uneasy glances as Meghan's cheeks flushed crimson under the hot studio lights. You know what? She shot back, her voice rising just enough to echo. At least I know who I am. I'm not hiding behind a desk, making snide remarks about other people because I'm too afraid to take risks myself. Ouch. That landed. Graham's mouth twitched into a thin line, his hands tightening together. Then he struck back. Well, at least I don't mistake victimhood for courage. The room froze. The audience collectively gasped. It was like the air itself was sucked out of the studio. Meghan blinked, stunned for just a moment, before slipping the mask of poise back onto her face. You really think you're clever, don't you? She sneered. Sitting up here every week, mocking people's pain for ratings. Better than monetizing it. Graham snapped back, not missing a single beat. The crowd inhaled as one sharp, uneasy, almost afraid. The tension wasn't just thick, it was crackling like static electricity. Meghan leaned forward, eyes locked onto his like daggers. Careful, Graham, she hissed, her voice low but dripping with danger. You're about one question away from making a very big mistake. Oh? Graham's voice was calm but edged with steel. And what mistake would that be? Asking you what everyone else is already thinking? Meghan's laugh this time wasn't charming. It was sharp, humorless, cold. No, Graham. Forgetting that you're not untouchable. The silence that followed? Deafening. The audience shifted nervously in their seats, terrified to even breathe too loudly. Graham leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers in front of his lips, eyes locked on her like a chess master studying his opponent. Touché, he murmured finally. But let's see how long you can keep this up. By now, the tension was unbearable. Everyone could feel it in their bones. The witty banter was gone. This wasn't comedy anymore. It was a full-on battle of egos, and both sides were cracking. Meghan sat rigidly on the red sofa, arms crossed, eyes flashing like fire. Graham, usually unshakable, sat quietly, now his trademark smirk replaced with a thin, irritated line. Even the cameras seemed to tremble, waiting for the moment when one of them would finally snap. The audience, who had come expecting laughter and cheeky gossip, now sat frozen, afraid to even cough. Well, Graham finally broke the silence, his voice calm but edged like a knife. At least we can agree on one thing. You're consistently combative. Meghan let out a sharp, humorless laugh. You're hilarious, Graham. A man who's built a career out of needling guests thinks I'm combative. How original. He raised one eyebrow, slow and deliberate. Not original, Meghan. Just accurate. She tilted her head, sarcasm dripping from her every word. Oh, do you get a medal every time you insult a guest? Just enough to make headlines, but not enough to get canceled? Is that how this works? The audience gasped. A few even chuckled nervously, unsure which side they were supposed to be on. Graham's lips twitched, but not into a smile. Oh, don't flatter yourself, Meghan. I've had far more challenging guests than you. Meghan leaned forward, her voice dropping to a quiet hiss, the kind of quiet that cut deeper than any shout. I'm sure you have. But tell me how many of them left this stage wishing they'd never agreed to come here. Boom. The crowd stiffened. Graham's jaw flexed, the only sign she'd hit a nerve. He adjusted his cuffs with exaggerated precision before firing back. The ones who confuse accountability with cruelty usually do. For just a split second, Meghan faltered. But then she snapped back, her voice rising enough to slice through the tense silence. Oh, please. You're not holding anyone accountable here. You're just another cynical old man pretending to be relevant by tearing people down. The words hung in the air like smoke, thick, suffocating. Even the band in the corner had stopped fidgeting with their instruments. Graham's gaze hardened, his voice soft but laced with venom. Cynical? He repeated slowly. You're calling me cynical? Meghan didn't flinch. That's right. Cynical, jaded, bitter. Take your pick. His nostrils flared, the mask slipping further. Better cynical than sanctimonious. Meghan's cheeks flushed, but her lips curled into a faint, defiant smile. That's cute, Graham. Really? Trying to turn this around on me? Is that what you do when you finally run out of clever insults? And with that, Graham shifted in his chair, no longer bothering to mask the irritation that now burned just beneath the surface. Oh, trust me, Graham snapped, his voice low but dangerous. I've got plenty left. And then Meghan made the mistake that changed everything. She began, her voice openly mocking now. I can see why you've never really made it beyond this sofa. Too scared to do anything real. Too scared to actually create anything. Easier to just sit here safe sniping at people who've actually risked something. The audience gasped as if they'd just witnessed a car crash in slow motion. Graham's eyes narrowed to slits, the color draining from his usually rosy cheeks. You think sitting here isn't real? You think what I do has no value? His words cut sharp. That's rich coming from someone who's turned victimhood into a brand. Meghan's eyes widened and then she laughed. A sharp, cutting laugh that rattled the studio so much even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Oh, there it is, she taunted. The truth at last. You just can't stand that I walked away and still became bigger than you'll ever be. Graham's voice rose, cracking the calm veneer he'd held onto all night. You think walking away makes you brave? You think abandoning responsibility and then crying about it makes you admirable? That's when Meghan snapped. She shot to her feet sudden, defiant, the audience collectively recoiling as if they'd just seen someone pull a knife on stage. You don't get to talk to me like that, she hissed, her body shaking with rage. You don't know me, Graham. You don't know what I've been through. And you don't know when to stop, he fired back, his voice ice cold, carrying a finality that silenced the room. They were both standing now, toe to toe, the iconic red sofa between them like a battlefield. Meghan crossed her arms, stepping closer, her voice dripping with venom. You're pathetic. Graham's faint smile returned, but it never reached his eyes. And you're finished. The crowd gasped louder than ever, an audible shockwave that rolled across the studio. Even the lights above seemed to dim, as though the entire set knew something irreversible had just happened. Meghan's fists clenched tight, her voice dropping to a whisper, the microphones catching every syllable. You'll regret this. Oh, my dear, Graham murmured just as quietly, eyes never leaving hers. I already do. The tension was unbearable, suffocating the air so thick it was hard to breathe. The two of them stood locked in a silent standoff, neither willing to back down. The audience, frozen in their seats, watching, waiting, knowing something had to give. Buckle up, because what unfolded on that stage wasn't just TV drama. It was a battlefield of pride and ego gone nuclear. Neither one blinked, neither one backed down, and the audience could feel it like the air was crackling with electricity. But here's the thing. Even the fiercest storms eventually hit land. And when this one broke, it was brutal, raw, and unforgettable. Nobody in that studio would ever erase what came next. Picture this. Graham, usually the charming ringmaster of chaos, suddenly shifting gears into something colder like a judge slamming down the gavel. And Meghan? She found herself standing at the edge, dignity slipping through her fingers like sand in an hourglass. The silence was deafening. You could hear every breath, every cough, every whisper. Meghan's arms folded tight across her chest, her gaze defiant, but her breathing sharp, audible, and heavy. Meanwhile, Graham's knuckles were white as marble on the back of that red sofa, his jaw clenched like a vice. And then snap! Someone coughed nervously in the audience. Another gasped under their breath, whispering, "Oh my God," as if the walls themselves were watching. The cameras, locked in like predators on prey, catching every flicker of this standoff. Then it happened. Graham straightened. The sparkle, the cheeky grin gone. What replaced it? Steel, command, authority. He smoothed his tie, adjusted his jacket, and unleashed words sharp enough to cut glass. "Meghan," he said, slow, deliberate, devastating. "I think we're done here." The room froze. Meghan blinked, stunned, as if her ears had betrayed her. "Excuse me?" she fired back, her voice cracking like a whip. "You heard me," Graham shot back, towering with icy calm. "This stopped being productive 10 minutes ago. And as much as I love spirited debate," he paused, letting the silence slice through the room, "I can't let my show become your personal therapy session." Gasps rippled across the crowd like a wave. Meghan's lips parted, finally rattled, finally caught off guard. You're kicking me off your show?" she stammered, her voice rising an octave, dripping with disbelief. Graham smirked, no warmth, no charm, just the cruelty of finality. "Let's call it bringing the curtain down early for the sake of everyone here." The producers? Frozen. Eyes darting, hands twitching, but no one dared intervene. The audience? Caught between shock and thrill, some even clapping before realizing just how savage this was. Meghan's arms fell, fists clenched tight at her sides, her voice trembling like a broken cord. "You don't get to dismiss me like some forgettable guest." But Graham silenced her with a single raised hand, smooth, lethal, commanding. "Oh, my dear," he purred with venom, "I'm not dismissing you because you're forgettable. I'm dismissing you because you're unforgettable for all the wrong reasons." Boom. The crowd gasped, mouths covered, whispers flying like wildfire. This wasn't just TV anymore, this was history in the making. Her eyes were glassy now, but still blazing with fury, like fire trapped behind glass. And then she hissed, low and venomous, "You'll regret this. You think you can humiliate me? You think this makes you look strong?" Graham didn't even flinch. His smile sharpened into something razor thin, a dagger disguised as a grin. "No, Meghan," he fired back, his voice like steel cutting through velvet. "This isn't about looking strong. This is about reminding you and everyone else watching that respect isn't optional here. And you left yours at the door." Boom! That was the final blow. Meghan's lips pressed into a thin, furious line. Without another word, she snatched her, clutched from the sofa, rose tall, and spun on her heel like a queen storming off her throne. The audience? Frozen, breathless. Not a cough, not a whisper, just pure silence as her heels clicked with deadly precision across the stage. The cameras followed her every move, like vultures circling, catching every deliberate step toward the exit. And then she paused. Right at the studio doors, she turned back, her eyes locked on Graham. Her face? A twisted cocktail of defiance, rage, and just maybe a flicker of regret. But then click! The doors shut behind her, the faint sound echoing like a gunshot through the suffocating silence. For a long, brutal beat, Graham just stood there, motionless, unreadable. Then, with a slow inhale, he adjusted his jacket, smoothed his tie, and let the tiniest twinkle return to his eye. And with impeccable timing, he quipped, "Well, I suppose we'll be needing the bigger sofa next time." The studio erupted. Nervous laughter, scattered applause, gasps of disbelief. The tension began to crack, but the electricity lingered, sizzling in the air like static before a storm. Even the band picked up their instruments again, hesitant, awkward, as if afraid she'd burst back through the doors at any second. But she didn't. Meghan was gone, her heels clicking furiously down the corridor, already rewriting the narrative, already plotting her next move. And make no mistake, she wouldn't forget this night, and neither would anyone else. So what do you think of this unforgettable clash between Meghan Markle and Graham Norton? Did Graham cross a line, or was he completely justified in sending her packing? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I cannot wait to hear where you stand on this explosive showdown.